The East Shield border fortification programme has found its way into an EU white paper. The document, which has just been published in Brussels, recognises the project as crucial to the
Ma to
security of
otwierać
not
drogę
only
do
Poland, but also
współfinansowania
of the
go
entire
przez
region.
instytucje
Publication
unijne,
is
choć
supposed to allow
wcale
for its
nie jest to
co-financing by
przesądzone.
EU institutions, although this is by no means a foregone conclusion.
These are decisive days for Europe, and we have a Pact agenda for the European Council. Of course, we will discuss Ukraine, how to get to a just and lasting peace. But we are challenged in our competitiveness and we are challenged in our security agenda.
Today in Brussels, the EU held a summit focused specifically on security. The head of the European Commission has already announced a plan to rearm Europe, consisting of 150 billion euros in loans for armament projects and a loosening of the budget discipline of member states for defence spending. Unfortunately, most of this money will be pumped into Germany's deteriorated arms industry. The military has been treated negligently in Western Europe. This is what has caused the conflict between Donald Trump and the European elites, because he doesn't intend for the United States taxpayer to fund not just US security, but also German, French or other security, all at the same time. It wasn't until Donald Trump who made Brussels' left-wing establishment realise that Europe needs to arm itself and build the defence capabilities it had lost by trusting Russia during the time of the disastrous diplomatic reset. One goal is to increase defence spending by European NATO members to at least 3% of GDP.
If we invest enough in defence, if we build our capabilities, then it will also deter aggressors to attack us. If we don't do that, weakness invites aggressor to attack.
Now the Germans, Spaniards and French, who have been winding down their armies for years, want to dictate to Central and Eastern European countries in the immediate vicinity of criminal Russia what defence should look like. That image is based, of course, on weapons and equipment manufactured primarily in Germany. We are confronted with various challenges, especially related to Russian aggression in Ukraine. That is why here we must set an agenda for our actions. The current iteration of the Shield East project, pushed through by Poland's current governing coalition, is for now just words. A vague project, at least a decade late, designed primarily to fuel the economies of Western European countries, mainly Germany. This is the real reason for the sudden interest of EU officials in defence. Whether in Germany or the Netherlands, in the UK or in France, they have always cut down on defence. And now we can see in what state these armies are. Unfortunately, the politicians of Western European countries did not listen to all that Central and Europe and Scandinavia had been saying. They effectively reduced the military and industrial potential of their armies, resulting in what we see today. Most Western European armies cannot carry out operational activities for an extended period of time without the support of the United States. Many European politicians have recently taken on a strongly anti-American bent. It is also just a step away from wanting to oust the world's largest superpower from the old continent. Putting anybody's security and sovereignty in the hands of Europe's left-wing establishment is not likely to end well. The main partner that we can count on is the United States. We absolutely can't count on some creation that will come into being in 10 or 15 years. In that time, Russia could very easily conquer Europe. The only guarantor of peace in our part of Europe is the presence of American troops and the strengthening of the alliance with the United States. The provision in the EU White Paper about the East Shield project will not stop the Kremlin's imperial inclinations. The best deterrent is US Army soldiers and equipment. The Russian hinterland, 700 kilometers from the front line. The Engels air base in the Saratov region, from which strategic bombers targeting Ukraine took off. The Ukrainians launched the largest drone attack on Russian territory since the war began. Moscow is not commenting on the losses. In the background, ceasefire negotiations are underway, with talks already continuing to stop attacks on the critical infrastructure. President Donald Trump's talks with Moscow and Kiev offer hope for a major step towards peace.
The leaders agreed Ukraine and America will continue working together to bring about a real end to the war, and that lasting peace under President Trump's leadership can be achieved. President Trump fully briefed President Zelensky on his conversation with Putin and the key issues discussed.
While Washington's assessment of the conversation was enthusiastic, most analysts were waiting for President Zelensky's reception of Donald Trump's strategy. In this regard, there seems to have been a breakthrough.
Ми говорили про
We talked about energy security, energy networks, and other civilian infrastructure. That's why I told President Trump that I think it's important that we prepare a list of facilities, formats that Russian long-range missiles could not hit, because we think these facilities fit the definition of energy and civilian infrastructure. According to White House reports, Trump was expected to propose to Zelensky that the U.S. take over, rebuild and manage the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. The Ukrainian president has responded positively to the proposal, except there is one snag. The power plant is currently occupied by Russian forces.
Technical teams will meet in Saudi Arabia in the coming days to discuss broadening the ceasefire to the Black Sea on the way to a full ceasefire. They agreed this could be the first step toward the full end of the war and ensuring security. So let me just remind you here that that is technical teams.
What does this look like in practice? It's a balancing act between the Kremlin and Kiev. The Americans are going from one wall to another.
This morning, shuttle diplomacy is difficult, it's tough, but we are going back and forth at every level, driving both sides towards a ceasefire and driving both sides towards an end to this war.
Interestingly, during the conversation between Presidents Trump and Zelensky, the issue of continued military aid to Kiev came up, and here Trump is not saying no.
One of the things that came up in the call with Zelensky today was a desire for air defense systems for Ukraine. Trump told Zelensky that he would look into it. Zelensky particularly wants Patriot missile systems.
If the Americans really wanted to get involved in rebuilding the energy infrastructure and to enter the Ukrainian market as a stakeholder, then, as was the case with the would-be mineral deal, they would become, in a way, responsible for this area. In this case, it is not so much a truce or ceasefire, but the question of Washington's specific holdings that may be of much greater importance to Moscow.
The full implementation of the EU Pact on migration and asylum. This very issue is the European Union's top priority for the coming year. The President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said in a letter to member state leaders. The European Commission considers this a key priority and stresses that achieving readiness requires maintaining the current pace of work to build a solid migration management system. The pact is scheduled to take effect in June 2026. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has announced that Poland will not accept migrants. Poland will not implement the Migration Pact in a way that would result in any additional migrant quotas in Poland. However, Polish MEPs are not the only ones indicating that Poland will have to accept migrants. We are talking about EU law, not just goodwill. We must abide by these laws that will apply to everyone. We have full respect for the fact that Poles have helped millions of Ukrainians fleeing Putin's Russian aggression. But that cannot be an excuse for the laws we are making. And they sound clear. If there is migratory pressure in a country, then other countries must behave in solidarity. I work in the committee that deals with migration, and I know from conversations with the commissioner that as early as October, the committee will indicate what number of migrants each country will have to accept. The alternative in the Migration Pact is a fee, 20,000 euros for every migrant who is not accepted. This amount, however, could increase over time. There is a whole package of lies, insinuations, and overinterpretations here, including the one that Donald Tusk once announced, that we would make money from migrants. Perhaps this is what politicians in the current ruling camp hoped. While in opposition, they demanded that migrants storming the Polish-Belarusian border be allowed in. Some, like Iwona Hartwich, with absolutely no hesitation. Let these people into Poland at last. Who they are will be determined later. The fact that it is worthwhile to determine who the migrants are has often been seen by residents of Germany, France, or Sweden. Shootings, gang wars, or the ramming of people by non-European drivers regularly occur on the streets of these countries. In most cases, these are young men, physically fit, experienced in various types of warfare or partisan, terrorist activities, and excellent in the use of various types of weapons. They range from heavy weapons to light ones, knives, and even machetes. That's why Germany has decided to send illegal migrants back to Poland. Some of them are being transported to one of the immigration centers in Eisenhüttenstadt, just across the Polish-German border. Poland, however, will not reinstate controls. There is no such need, neither technically nor in terms of intelligence, nor when it comes to migrant movement. The Eisenhüttenstadt Center has been operating for years, and whatever they do there, I personally, as Deputy Minister of Internal Affairs and Administration, am completely uninterested in it. The government should immediately reinstate controls on the Polish-German border. There are clear signs that illegal immigrants are coming into Poland from Germany. It is the government's duty to guard the Polish borders. Allowing large-scale illegal migrants into Poland could affect more than just the country's security. This could simply lead to the economic destabilization of Poland, because Poland, as a hitherto safe country, will cease to be an attractive place for those who would like to invest or just live here peacefully. Under such conditions, it is not the economy, but human trafficking that can flourish. According to Europol, 90% of those crossing the European Union's external borders illegally are assisted by smugglers. Since people smugglers have learned that illegal migration will be regulated by the Migration Pact in such a way that member states will be forced to take in illegal migrants, we can expect an even bigger migration wave. Such a situation could have been opposed by Polish people in a 2023 referendum. At that time, however, Donald Tusk called for its boycott. I solemnly before you annul this referendum. The referendum turned out to be non-binding, so now concrete actions are needed. And such will be announced by citizens' candidate for the president of Poland, Karol Nawrocki. We are and will be a fortress of security. This must happen, and we must establish an office for combating illegal migration. Such an office will be established on my initiative when I become the president of Poland. As for the Migration Pact, I say clearly, it must be unilaterally terminated to prevent such scenes on the streets of Poland.
The windmill law has been pushed through the Polish parliament at great speed, despite the fact that the EU policy, the Green Deal, has had a disastrous effect on Polish energy prices. Just how much can energy prices still rise? The Polish government will turn on the windmills, despite the upcoming presidential election. At the Ministry of Climate and Environment, there is an unexpected rush. The government has approved a draft amendment to the windmill law, reducing the minimum distance of windmill energy farms from homes from 700 to 500 meters. The ruling Civic Coalition government started its rule with the windmill law scandal, and Donald Tusk himself had to intervene and withdraw his support from this law. Now, it is unclear who wrote this law. It is important to watch what the Climate and Environment Minister is doing now, because there are suspicions that she is not the only one who worked on the provisions of this law, and we will be watching this closely. Neighbors of already existing windmill farms disagree with the proposed law. There are very many people who do not agree with such large windmill turbines being built near their homes. Normally, the current governing coalition wants to wait after the presidential election in May before making reforms, for fear of losing popularity. On the issue of accelerating climate reforms, however, it has announced very swift action. The Clean Air program will start in April, the same program that worked at its best under the previous Law and Justice government, but was unexpectedly halted late last year. The reason? Officially, it was lack of funds. We rejected these principles, we emptied the closets and filled the coffers with money. The opposition has a different view. Climate and Environment Minister Henning Kloska is known for rarely telling the truth. The Clean Air program was implemented under the Law and Justice government and was halted under the Civic Coalition government. We expect the minister to take real action to curb the high energy prices that are currently draining Poles' wallets. But the energy minister has a different opinion. When we produce more energy in the country, energy becomes cheaper. Although in this case, things may be different. This is interesting because it shows great determination to implement the EU's climate policy, despite the fact that it raises a lot of public resistance. And we see that energy prices are rising significantly. Across Europe, costs are rising as a result of this climate policy. At the same time, we have an impasse on the construction of a nuclear power plant. This key project is at a standstill. This is important information. The delays on nuclear power are significantly increasing energy prices. An energy crisis is in full swing and, as a result of the Green Deal, it is getting worse. Why is this happening? Radical idealists are, unfortunately, in key positions. And even more measures are being announced that will make energy prices even worse. Moreover, the EU heating tax is getting closer. The EU's ETS2 stipulates that from 2027, heating homes with fossil fuels is to be taxed. And although the climate minister in Donald Tusk's government assures that there is a chance it will come in later, the rush is very apparent. And more Poles are having to make tough budgeting decisions.